Ok. Sono molto felice parlarvi. Mi chiamo Lydia Harriss, sono un consulente per le scienze fisiche nell'ufficio parlamentare di scienze e tecnologie nel Regno Unito, dove mi occupo anche del nostro lavoro internazionale. Parlo solo un po' di italiano, mi dispiace. Penso che potete ascoltarmi più velocemente in inglese di quanto possa parlare in italiano, quindi passerò all'inglese. Per favore, ditemi se parlo troppo velocemente, va bene? Okay. Can I go to the first slide, please? Okay, so I would like to begin by giving you an introduction to my office, POST, which is the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology at the UK Parliament. And we are part of the administration that supports Parliament. So we provide information and advice about the sciences and the social sciences to both chambers of the UK Parliament, so to both the elected House of Commons and the appointed House of Lords. And we do this by acting as a bridge between Parliament and the external research community. And the reason that we have this bridge is that we want to ensure that the best available research evidence is available to inform the decisions that are being made within Parliament. Good access to scientific information is really, really important for policymakers. And I think there are a couple of reasons for this. In one instance, there are many policy areas where there is a large amount of research evidence that's available that could help to inform decisions in that area. So, for example, within the area of education policy, you can look to see what does the research evidence say about how effective different teaching practices are. And then that can help parliamentarians to understand what the potential impacts of different policy options might be. On the other hand, we are also seeing increasing areas of policy where science and technology, often very technical subject areas, are involved. So, for example, artificial intelligence is increasingly being used across many different areas of society, and it's raising questions for what does it mean for employment, for example? What will jobs look like in the future? And what does it mean for skills? And it's really important that policymakers have an understanding of what these technologies are and how they're being used in order to begin to understand what the potential social and policy implications may be. So my team at POST goes about explaining this complex, these complex areas of science and technology, but also analysing the research evidence and then communicating that to parliamentarians, helping them to make more informed decisions and ultimately strengthening governance and democracy in the UK. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so before I tell you a bit more about what my team specifically does, I want to paint a broader picture for you, because POST is just one of a number of different parts of the UK Parliament that is engaging with the research community and that is providing research evidence to parliamentarians. So I think it's really important that you're aware of these other parts of Parliament too. So we have 2 research libraries within the UK Parliament, one for each of the chambers, and they provide a fantastic, very responsive service. So any member of Parliament can ask a question and the library will research an answer and will respond within a couple of hours if it's very urgent, up to a couple of weeks if it's a slightly less urgent question. The libraries also produce briefings that support the debates that are happening and also the legislation as well. Often their briefing work focuses on the policy side rather than going into the technical detail. But they are very responsive, so they are very driven by the agenda within the House. In addition, we also have a number of select committees, and these are groups of parliamentarians drawn from across the different political parties who meet together and they hold inquiries to scrutinise different aspects of government work. We have 2 science and technology committees, one in each of the 2 chambers, and they hold inquiries where they invite external experts into Parliament, including academics, to give evidence. And then in addition, there's my team POST, and we work in a very proactive way. So we are looking ahead to see what topics Parliament will need to know about in the next 6 months, next 2 years, next 5 years, rather than being driven by the current agenda within Parliament. And this longer timescale allows us to engage more deeply with the research evidence and also with the experts who are involved in the research. I want to also just remind you that we're focusing here on the services available to Parliament, but government has a completely different set of services. It has its own sources of science advice, and that is totally separate from what I'm going to focus on here. But that is also very important. Can we skip on, please? Okay. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the logistics of my team. So there are 13 members of staff within POST, and that includes 8 advisors. I'm one of those advisors. And between us, the 8 of us cover this range of subject areas. So we look after biological sciences and health, physical sciences and computing, which is my area of expertise, energy and environment, and the social sciences. In addition to the team of 13 staff, we are joined by between 20 and 30 PhD students every year. And these students take a break from their PhD for 3 months, and they come and work with us, often on one of our briefings. And they come from a whole range of backgrounds because they are funded by the Research Council, so public funding, or by some of the learned societies who also sponsor students. And these studentships are really valuable to us because they significantly increase the capacity of our office and the amount of work we're able to produce. They make us quite good value, but also it's a training opportunity. So we are training the next generation of researchers to engage with policy. So for the students who continue on in academia, they have a much better understanding of how their research is relevant to society. They understand how they can engage with policymakers and how they can use their research to influence those policy decisions. For the students who decide that they want to leave academia, they have developed their communication skills, and many of them go on to careers in science communication or within policy as well. Okay, I think it's perhaps also just worth mentioning how POST is funded as an office, because it's always very helpful to know where the money's coming from. So the office itself is funded directly by the parliamentary administration. We also receive a small amount of funding from the Economic and Social Research Council, so one of the public research councils, and they fund our social sciences section, because the social sciences are a relatively new addition to POST. They've been part of the team for about 7 years now, and we are gradually bringing them in-house, hopefully. So ultimately, the aim is to have the social sciences team funded by Parliament directly, but for the moment, the Research Council is supporting them. And then finally, I just want to mention an important aspect of our governance structure, which is our board. So we have a group, a little bit like one of our select committees, a mixture of MPs and peers, so members of both houses, and some external academics as well. And they meet 4 times a year, and they direct our work programme. So advisors such as myself will make suggestions to them of what topics we should be working on, but they make the final decision about which ones are most relevant and most timely for them. So it's a really important way of us understanding what our audience wants. Can you move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so I'm now going to talk to you a little bit more about the nitty-gritty of what we actually do. Can you go to the next slide, please? So we are best known for our post-note briefings. So these are 4-page documents that provide an overview of a particular technology, or perhaps looking at the social science research evidence in a particular area. These are proactive, so they are on subjects that we think Parliament will need to know about, as I was saying before, in the next 6 months, next couple of years. And we have a very rigorous, well-established process for producing one of these. So we look at the academic research literature and the other policy literature around the subject. We interview between 25 and 35 experts from academia, industry, government, and the third sector as well, so campaigning groups, charitable organisations. And the briefings are externally peer-reviewed too, so that's a really important part of checking that it is balanced, that we've represented the range of perspectives and that it's absolutely as accurate as possible. They're all publicly available on our website, and we also send them out to parliamentarians as well. Events are another important part of our work programme, and these really focus on bringing together parliamentarians with external experts, including academics. These can range from small, private roundtable discussions, which create a safe space in which parliamentarians can ask silly questions without anybody judging them, through to large-scale exhibitions where we're showcasing different aspects of research. Can you move on, please? Horizon scanning is another important part of our work programme. And this involves looking ahead to see what topics we think will be relevant to Parliament in the next few years. So it's looking to see what developments are happening within the research world, how technologies are developing and being implemented, but also how is policy changing, what is the government's agenda, and what legislation are they likely to introduce in the future. And we're looking to see where those different things intersect to help identify topics for future briefings, but also to feed into other parts of Parliament. So our horizon scanning work helps to inform the work of the select committees when they're thinking about what inquiries to do in the future. Our horizon scanning work can help them think about which topics are likely to be relevant to them. We support other parts of Parliament as well. We work very closely with the committees and with the libraries. I won't go into the detail in too much depth, but largely it involves helping parliamentary colleagues to access academic expertise and research expertise. We also provide training as well to help colleagues develop their own ability to find research evidence and to assess it. Knowledge exchange is an important aspect of our work, so hopefully you've got a sense from what I've said so far about how important our relationships with the external research community are. We are a relatively small team, and we're very dependent on external expertise in order to understand the subjects that we are dealing with. So I mentioned that we interview experts for our written briefings. We are looking for experts to bring in to give evidence to the select committees. And so that network of contacts is very, very important to us. So we now have 2 members of the team that are dedicated to building up that network for us. So that's our knowledge exchange unit. And part of their work involves providing information and training to academics on how they can engage with Parliament more effectively. International work is, I'm very pleased to say, part of what we do, because that's one of the reasons why I'm able to join you today. And this essentially focuses on supporting the development of science advice services within other parliaments and congresses around the world. We have a number of ongoing collaborations with Spain, with Mexico, with Argentina and Chile. Unfortunately, I was hoping that you would have the opportunity to hear from Lorenzo from Spain a little bit later, but unfortunately he's not able to join us. But we've been working very closely with them over the last year or so in their endeavours to set up their new office. Okay, so there are a few principles that underpin all of the work that we do at POST. I just want to highlight 3 of them because I think that tells you something very important about what our intentions are and why we're here. So one important principle is being independent and totally non-party political. And this is really important because parliamentarians are flooded with information from people who largely want to influence them in one way or another. And so it's very important that they know that when they come to POST or when they come to one of the research libraries, the information they're obtaining is totally independent and we don't have an agenda. We're just providing them with the information. one important way in which we maintain our impartiality is that we don't make recommendations. Wherever possible, we will set out what the different policy options are, and we'll talk about what the research evidence is for those different options, but then we hand that information over to parliamentarians, and they make their decision using that information, but also considering all the other factors that they have to take into account, like the economics, like the politics, like what their constituents want, what their party wants. So it's a piece of the puzzle that they are taking into account when they're making their decisions. And then finally, we are using science to inform policy, but we aren't developing policy around science. So we're not looking specifically at the policy around science funding or how scientific research is conducted in the UK or how science can boost the UK economy. It is very much looking at how we can draw information from the work that's going on in research and how we can use that to inform policy. So I thought I would end at the beginning. And I think that's because I want to give you a sense of the journey that we've been on, because we haven't always been a team of 13 people. We began back in the 1980s when a group of parliamentarians got together. They had a trip over to the US, and they saw that the Congress there had a technology assessment office there at that time. And they thought, fantastic, the UK doesn't have this looks like an amazing resource, and we really want to have something like that in the UK. So they came back to the UK, and they went to the Prime Minister at the time, and Mrs. Thatcher said, great, but there's no funding for it. So, if you want to go ahead and set it up, please do. So they started fundraising, and they worked with the research community, with the learned societies, with various charities, and they collected enough money in order to set up, to borrow an office with 2 people in it, 2 computers, 1 printer, 1 telephone, down the road from Parliament, outside of the administration, with enough money for a couple of years. And they started from scratch. So they started producing briefings, started building up their networks, and grew from there. So over the next few years, they were able to bring in money to have staff join the team for a short period of time. There were various reviews where Parliament looked at it and said, is this useful? Is it value for money? Is it helping parliamentarians or not? And then eventually, it was brought into the parliamentary administration. So one of the committees held an inquiry and decided, yes, this is a valuable service. We want to bring it into Parliament on a temporary basis. And then in 2001, after a few more reviews, it was made permanent. So we're now a permanent office within Parliament. We're celebrating POST 30th anniversary this year, and I hope that we'll be around for a few more years yet. I think that's probably a good point to leave it to have enough time for discussion. Grazie per l'attenzione.